Few people understand the Vatican better than John Allen, a senior correspondent for the National Catholic Reporter based in Rome. When Pope Benedict announced his resignation, John started doing his homework on the cardinals who will most likely be considered for the job. This is Habemus Papabili. Okay, John, Marc Ouellet, 68 years old, fellow Canadian of mine, currently the prefect of the Congregation for Bishops. What do we need to know about Marc Ouellet?
Well, first let's start with the case for Marc Ouellet as a possible pope. One, he has an extraordinary intellect. I think many people would see him as cut from the same sort of cerebral cloth as Benedict XVI, comes out of the same theological circles, the Communio school founded by then Father Ratzinger in the years after the Second Vatican Council. So an extraordinary thinker. Second, a guy who in his own biography sort of brings the first world and the developing world together. 12 years off and on in Colombia as a missionary, somebody who has traveled widely, knows the situation facing the church in the far-flung corners of the earth, speaks 6 or 7 languages comfortably, a real cosmopolitan. And third, he's also somebody who knows where the bodies are buried in the Roman Curia, having put in 2 stints in the Vatican, 1 in the Council for Christian Unity, and now, of course, the all-important Congregation for Bishops. And Sebastian, I can assure you that if you're looking to win friends and influence people in the Catholic Church, having the power to name bishops is a pretty good way to do it.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of people are concerned about reforming the Curia in some sense, the structure. Is Marc Ouellet capable of doing that?
I think that's the big question mark. I mean, certainly he is capable in the sense of knowing how the system works, working in a very important office in the Vatican that is a real decision-making organism. So he knows the system from the inside. And further, if you look at his track record as a pastor in Quebec, although he had external problems, certainly, but I think internally, he had a profile of somebody who ran a fairly tight ship. However, the question really is, and this is an odd thing to say as a knock against a papal candidate, but many people would say, is he maybe just too nice a guy for this job? I mean, does he have the steel in his spine, so to speak, to make the tough choices when it means sometimes disappointing, frustrating, or angering men you've seen as friends your entire life?
What about being a Canadian? Do you think that's a pro, that's a con? I mean, you've mentioned some of the factors about him coming from Quebec, but internationally speaking, a Canadian coming out on that balcony, what does that mean?
Well, you got to remember this is the Vatican, Sebastian, where we think in centuries. The working motto is talk to me on Tuesday and we'll get back to you in 300 years. So, for these guys, the new world is still new to them. And so I think that there is a kind of, I would say, anti-old guard spirit among some of the cardinals who are going to be voting in this conclave, a kind of desire to both substantively and symbolically break with old ways of doing business and embrace something new. So I think that's probably a plus for Ouellet that he comes from North America. That said, I honestly believe nationality is a very secondary concern. I think they've got a checklist of things they're looking for, and if they can find them, it really doesn't matter what passport the guy holds.
Are you going to be surprised if he walks out on the balcony?
Well, at one level, you're always surprised when you see a new pope. I mean, I remember in 2005, a blind man could see that Cardinal Ratzinger had strong support going into that conclave. And yet, simply because I had known him for a long time and I was so accustomed to thinking of him as the right hand of the Pope, not the Pope himself, to see him standing on that balcony in the white vestments and delivering his Urbi et Orbi was a kind of shock to the system. And I would have a similar reaction to Marc Ouellet, somebody I've been at dinner tables with and I've been on stages with, and I've known him off and on over the years. At one level, politically, it would be one of the least surprising developments if he were to be elected, but personally, sure, it would be kind of stunning to see him standing there.
Thanks, John.